We are going to study tests with Rabash from the study of the 10 Sefirot, part 5, item 46. Inner light, we're going to continue from the middle of it. Before we start, we're going to read item 46. Afterwards, it returned to not mati, not expanding in keter. Then it was expanding in chokhmah, bina, and chesed. Then it did not expand in gvura. It expanded in tiferet and did not expand in netzach. Expanded in hod and did not expand in yesod, as it ascended in hod. At that time, it turns its anterior and gives light to Malchut below in her place, and then it expands in Malchut. Now, the first phases are complete, which is the reality of the expansion. Thus, all the 10 lights have reached Malchut. Let's start the lesson with Rabash.
Page 339, column 1, the section beginning with "Now we thoroughly understand." What's written? Now we thoroughly understand the Sefirah Malchut, since the vessel in her is the vessel of Malchut that was extended from the vessel of Hod. He wants to help us understand, to make a summary, what was in the vessel of Yesod, what was there when it was expanding in Hod, that the vessel of Yesod rose to Hod, and what remained of it gave its residue to the vessel of Malchut. So he says, now we thoroughly understand the Sefirah Malchut, since the vessel in her is the vessel of Malchut that was extended from the vessel of Hod. What's he saying? The Sefirah of Malchut, since the vessel in her is the vessel of Malchut that was extended from the vessel of Hod. What does this mean? And the light in her is the phase of Dalet that surrounds the Vav from the phase of Hey that is extended from Zon of Bina. However, the light of Malchut herself is what clothed here in the vessel of Yesod. This is why Malchut is called a mirror that does not shine. As the Ari says above, what's written here? He says this: in essence, Hod is called the vessels of Malchut. However, Yesod is called what was drawn from Hod. And Malchut is also called what was drawn from Hod. Only when it was not expanding in Hod, then what was drawn to Yesod was the light of Malchut from the vessel of Malchut, from the vessel of Yesod. And afterwards, when it became expanding in Hod, then the light of Yesod rose to the vessel of Hod, and the vessels of Malchut that were drawn from Hod were drawn to the vessel of Malchut. And what light? We learned the light of Malchut that was in the vessel of Yesod rose to Hod. Why? We learned a rule, Vak of the Sof, which Vak of the Sof, called Yesod. When there is Gal to the Sof, called Hod, connects to the Gal. We also learned that since there was a Hey in Yesod, and the Hey is composed of male and female, The truncated vav inside the hay indicates chasadim, which comes from the vak of the male from the vessel of bina, that is vak. The dalet that is on top of the vav indicates gal, but this is poor and destitute, because all the phase 2, that is in the vessel of bina, is called phase 2 of clothing. It has no light, only a record. Therefore, since the light of Yesod that was below in the vessel of Yesod, considered as judgment, as the light of Malchut, received sweetening from this hay, which is considered chasadim. Therefore, when it rose above, it did not take its sweetening, that is what sweetened it, which is the vav, chasadim. Whereas the dalet, it did not take along with it, because the entire dalet was what it needed in order to have gal, and that is a small illumination called dalet, but it is gal. Now that it rose to Yesod, to Hod, where there is now gal, the light of Chokhmah in the vessel of Hod, therefore it left the dalet below, and this dalet was given to the vessel of Malchut. It turns out, what light does Malchut have? Not even the light of Malchut. Only a Malchut that is poor and destitute. And the rule was that it does not shine. So we've finished here and we need to begin. You find. I begin once more. You find that there are 4 males and 4 females in this second expansion. And he specifies. The first 2 couples are Zon of Keter and Zon of Chokhmah. And the males in them are more important than the females. Why? Since the male of Keter is from phase 4 of clothing. It comes from the level of Keter. But the female of Keter is only from phase 3. Smaller, further. The male of the vessel of Chokhmah is from phase 3. But the female of the vessel of Chokhmah is from phase 2. Thus, the males are greater than the females. However, in both, the males and females are in one vessel. Since they are close to each other, because the males are from the records that remained after the departure of the first expansion. Hence, they are devoid of light. The females, however, are from the new second expansion and are filled with light. What's written here?
When we say that from the vessel of Keter remains phase 4 over 3, that's the first expansion. So 4 and 3 both remain. If I'd say that upon that clothing you can't extend the light, and on the coarseness you can extend the light, but it's not written that way. So what is written? Here there is, here there isn't. Or maybe we should say it otherwise. I'd also understand that from the clothing, the expansion doesn't come downward into the goof. When we say that the vessel of Keter, meaning the vessel of the goof, then the expansion only comes from the coarseness. That can also be clear. But it's written not this or that it's abstract light. You understand? If I explain that from the vessel of Keter there is no clothing, what is there? Only phase 3 of coarseness. So we say that there's an incorporation. Also here, from that clothing, but what expands below? Only coarseness? That's also not written. Let's see onward. However, in the male and female of vessel of Binah, the female is greater than the male. Why? What's written here? However, in the male and female of the vessel of Binah, the female is greater than the male. What does it mean greater? We have to explain that. We're talking about the coarseness. This is because the male is the phase of Vak of Binah, the light that came from the coupling in the vessel of Chokhmah on the two bets, the phase 2, and the Gar of the degree remains above. Only Vak comes to the vessel of Binah. But the female is the phase of Gar of Binah. What's Gar of Binah? Phase 2 of clothing, which is a record that remained without the vessel of Binah during the first expansion. So why is she called a female? Because of the record. He doesn't mention that he didn't have the record that was called female. So according to this, also in Keter Chokhmah, we can also say that since there was no light called female, you understand what I'm asking? But we can explain that the greater light on behalf of the coarseness, here we learn that they are both phase 2. This is phase 2 of the first expansion. And this is phase 2 of the second expansion, but they're both phase 2. Just what is the difference? That it is Gar, that it's a record that remains from the degree of Keter, this phase 2. Phase 2 that receives from Binah is Vak of Binah. This we can explain. However, in the male and the female of the vessel of Binah, the female is greater than the male. This is because the male is the phase of Vak of Binah, and the female is the phase of Gar of the Binah. Nevertheless, they are both in one vessel, as the female is from the record and lacks light, and the male comes from the coupling of the zone of Chokhmah, which is why it is filled with light. Also, although the male is in the vessel of Keter, here now he's explaining. Although the male is the vessel of Keter, is a record considered devoid of light, that absence concerns only the Gar, from the perspective of the Vak. However, it is full light. In the male and female of the vessel of Binah, the female is greater than the male. This is because the male is the phase of Vak of Binah, and the female is the phase of Gar of Binah. Nevertheless, they are both in one vessel. Even though the vessel is greater. No, it's the opposite. We said that the female was greater. So he explains, nevertheless, they are both in one vessel, as the female is from the record and lacks light. But the male and female come from the coupling of Zon of Chokhmah, which is why it is filled with light. That's simple. Now we ask the question, if we say that the male of clothing has no light, so that is called that the male in the vessel of Keter is a record considered devoid of light. So what is the question? What do we say there? We learn. He tells us that the record of the male that remained in the vessel of Binah is called a female. So we ask the question, why the male that remains in the vessel of Keter is called a male?
נעבור לחלק הבא של השיעור, לימוד בין חברים.
We'll move